Listen carefully, because most people go through their entire lives without ever truly observing themselves. They observe the world around them constantly. They observe social media, people's opinions, distractions, problems, fears, noise, endless stimulation. But they rarely stop long enough to observe what is happening inside their own mind. And because of that, many people spend years living unconsciously, trapped inside emotional patterns and mental loops they never fully became aware of. Think about that for a moment, because a person cannot change what they refuse to observe, and maybe that is why so many people feel disconnected from themselves now, disconnected from peace, disconnected from clarity, disconnected from stillness, because the modern world trains people to constantly escape inward. Awareness through distraction, noise, overstimulation, and endless mental consumption. There was a man named Elias, and Elias spent most of his life living inside his thoughts without ever realizing it. Every morning his mind immediately filled with pressure, stress, fear, overthinking, comparison, regret, anxiety about the future, and memories from the past. And over time he became so accustomed to the chaos happening inside his own mind that he stopped questioning it completely. Let that sit with you, because many people mistake constant mental noise for normal living simply because they have experienced it for so long. And Elias tried everything to escape that feeling internally: endless scrolling, entertainment, staying busy, surrounding himself with noise at all times, because silence made him uncomfortable. But the problem was never outside of him. The problem was that he had become disconnected from observing himself consciously. And one night after another emotionally exhausting day, Elias sat alone in silence with no music, no phone, no television, just quiet, and for the first time in years, he noticed something unsettling. His mind never stopped moving, thought after thought after thought, fear after fear, memory after memory, and suddenly he realized something powerful. He had spent years identifying with every thought that entered his mind, without ever questioning whether those thoughts were truly him. Think about that for a moment, because many people believe they are their thoughts, when in reality they are simply observing mental activity conditioned through years of fear, programming, pain, distraction, and emotional survival. And that realization changed something inside Elias immediately, because for the first time he understood there was a difference between awareness and thought. And once someone begins recognizing that difference consciously, their entire perception of reality begins changing slowly from within. The next morning, Elias woke up before sunrise and sat quietly near his bedroom window, while the world outside still felt asleep. And instead of reaching for distraction like he normally did, he simply focused on his breathing, slowly inhaling, slowly exhaling, observing the movement of breath entering and leaving his body naturally. And at first his mind resisted the stillness completely. Thoughts rushed in endlessly, worries, random memories, imagined conversations, emotional reactions, fears about the future. But instead of fighting those thoughts, Elias did something different. He simply observed them. Let that sit with you, because awareness begins transforming people the moment they stop reacting automatically to every thought passing through their mind. And little by little, something unexpected started happening. The more Elias observed his breathing calmly, the more space began appearing between himself and the chaos inside his mind, and within that space he noticed something profound. Most of his suffering came not from reality itself, but from unconscious identification with fear-based thinking patterns constantly repeating internally. Think about that, because people often spend years emotionally trapped by thoughts they never consciously chose to believe. And once Elias became aware of that, he started observing his entire life differently. He noticed how quickly his mind searched for negativity, how often fear shaped his decisions unconsciously, how deeply external validation controlled his emotions, how overstimulation kept him disconnected from himself internally. And for the first time in years, he stopped running from silence, because silence was revealing truth, and truth changes everything. One evening, while sitting quietly outside watching the sky slowly darken into night, Elias focused again on his breathing. Slow inhale, slow exhale, and suddenly he noticed how different the world felt when his mind became still. Colors seemed deeper, sounds felt clearer, time itself felt slower somehow, almost like awareness itself had expanded beyond the constant noise of thought. And maybe someone listening tonight has experienced moments like that too. Moments where stillness suddenly feels more real than distraction ever did. Because when awareness deepens, perception changes naturally. And when perception changes, reality begins feeling different from within. And Elias understood now why so many people avoid stillness unconsciously. Because stillness forces observation, and observation reveals what? Distraction hides emotional wounds, fear patterns, insecurity, unresolved pain, subconscious conditioning, and many people spend their entire lives escaping inward observation because they are afraid of what they might discover about themselves emotionally. But Elias was no longer running from himself anymore, because through observing his breathing, he was slowly reconnecting with something deeper beneath the noise, something calmer, clearer, more grounded. And over time, he realized the breath was never just about relaxation. It was about awareness, because the breath always exists in the present moment, and the present moment is where consciousness becomes clear again. Think about that for a moment, because most suffering exists either in memories from the past or fear about the future, while awareness exists only here, now, in this moment. And the more Elias practiced observing his breath consciously, the more he noticed his reactions changing too. Situations that once triggered anxiety now felt easier to observe calmly. Emotional chaos no longer controlled him as deeply. Conversations felt different. Relationships felt different. Even the way he spoke to himself internally started changing, because awareness was slowly rewriting him from within. And maybe that is the hidden transformation most people never realize. True change does not always begin externally. Sometimes reality shifts because consciousness shifts first. And once consciousness shifts, the external world begins feeling completely different afterward. Elias began understanding that now more deeply than ever, because for years he searched outside himself for peace while remaining disconnected from the inner awareness capable of creating it. And maybe modern life conditions people to constantly search outward because a distracted mind is easier to control than an aware one. Think about that, because people disconnected from themselves often live automatically, reacting emotionally, consuming endlessly, seeking validation constantly, while rarely questioning the internal programming shaping their reality every single day. But awareness interrupts unconscious living, and once someone becomes aware of their own patterns deeply enough, they begin reclaiming control over their attention. emotions, energy, and perception consciously instead of automatically. And one night, while sitting quietly in darkness, Elias experienced something that changed him permanently. He suddenly realized he was not broken. He was conditioned through years of fear, overstimulation, emotional survival, distraction, and unconscious repetition. And once he saw that clearly, he stopped viewing himself through shame and started viewing himself through awareness instead. Let that sit with you, because awareness creates compassion, and compassion creates transformation. And slowly Elias no longer felt trapped by his own mind the way he once had, because instead of drowning inside thought, he learned how to observe thought consciously. And there is power in that observation, because what people observe clearly without reacting to begins losing unconscious control over them. And maybe that is why breathing awareness feels so powerful to people once they practice it deeply enough, because the breath reconnects awareness to the present moment, and the present moment reconnects people back to themselves. And perhaps someone listening tonight needed to hear this reminder. You are not every fearful thought passing through your mind. You are not every emotional reaction conditioned through pain. You are not the endless noise inside your head. There is something deeper beneath all of it, quietly observing, quietly aware, quietly present. And maybe your transformation begins the moment you stop running from stillness long enough to observe yourself honestly for the first time, because awareness rewrites reality from within. And once someone truly reconnects with themselves consciously, everything begins changing afterward. Their thoughts change. Their energy changes, their perception changes, their peace changes, their reality changes. And the deeper Elias went into observing himself consciously, the more he began realizing how much of modern life was designed to keep people disconnected from inner awareness entirely. Because the moment people wake up in the morning, they are immediately pulled outward. Notifications, opinions, fear-based, headlines, endless entertainment, pressure to constantly consume, constantly react, constantly compare themselves to everyone else around them. And over time, that constant outward attention weakens people's ability to simply sit with themselves quietly. Think about that for a moment, because a distracted mind rarely questions its own conditioning deeply enough to transform it. And maybe that is why stillness feels uncomfortable to so many people now, because stillness removes distraction. And when distraction disappears, people are finally forced to face what has been happening inside them all along. And Elias noticed that clearly now, because every time he sat quietly focusing on his breathing, deeper layers of awareness began surfacing inside him naturally. Memories he ignored emotionally, fears he buried beneath busyness, emotional wounds hidden beneath constant stimulation. And at first, that awareness felt overwhelming, because observation often reveals truths people spent years avoiding unconsciously. But slowly, Elias began understanding something powerful. Awareness itself was healing him, because healing begins the moment unconscious patterns become visible consciously. Let that sit with you, because many people cannot change their emotional reality because they never slow down long enough to observe the internal patterns shaping it. And one afternoon, Elias sat in complete silence watching rain fall against the window, while focusing slowly on each breath entering and leaving his body. Inhale, exhale, and suddenly he noticed how quickly the mind constantly searched for distraction. Whenever stillness deepened, random thoughts, imagined conversations, fears about the future, regrets from the past, and instead of becoming frustrated by it, he simply observed the movement of the mind calmly, because for the first time he realized something important. The mind behaves almost like a conditioned survival machine, constantly searching for stimulation, certainty, and emotional control. But awareness exists beyond that conditioning. Think about that, because once people stop identifying completely with mental noise, they begin recognizing there is a deeper intelligence, quietly observing everything beneath the surface. And over time, Elias noticed how differently his nervous system responded when he practiced breathing consciously each day. Situations that once created panic now felt manageable. Emotional triggers lost some of their unconscious control over him. Conversations felt less reactive, and slowly peace started replacing survival mode internally. And maybe someone listening tonight understands exactly what that feels like. The exhaustion of living with a nervous system constantly overstimulated by fear, pressure, comparison, and emotional chaos, because modern life conditions many people into permanent mental overstimulation without them even realizing it. And overstimulation disconnects people from awareness, from intuition, from stillness, from themselves. But breathing awareness reconnects people back to the present moment again. And the present moment is where transformation actually begins. One evening, Elias walked alone through the city after sunset, while focusing quietly on his breathing instead of the noise surrounding him. And for the first time, he noticed something strange. Most people around him looked mentally absent, moving automatically, staring endlessly at screens, reacting emotionally without awareness, rushing constantly without ever questioning why. And suddenly he understood how deeply unconscious living had become normalized in society. Let that sit with you, because many people spend years functioning automatically without ever truly feeling present inside their own life. And maybe that is why awareness changes reality so deeply once it develops, because awareness interrupts automatic living. And when automatic living is interrupted, people finally begin seeing themselves and the world clearly again. Elias started noticing how much his thoughts shaped his emotional reality too, because before awareness he unconsciously repeated the same internal narratives constantly. I'm not enough. Nothing will change. Life is overwhelming. People always leave. And because those thoughts repeated automatically for years, they slowly became internal truths, shaping how he experienced reality emotionally. But once he began observing his thoughts consciously instead of automatically believing them, he realized something life-changing. Thoughts are often conditioned patterns, not permanent truth. Think about that for a moment, because the moment people stop unconsciously believing every fearful thought inside their mind, they begin reclaiming the power to rewrite themselves internally. And slowly, Elias started replacing unconscious mental patterns with intentional awareness, not through force, not through pretending negativity didn't exist, but through conscious observation and repetition, because awareness creates space for new patterns to form naturally over time. And little by little, his inner dialogue changed, his energy changed, his emotional reactions changed. Even the way he carried himself physically changed, because consciousness itself was shifting from within. And perhaps that is what most people misunderstand about transformation. Real transformation is not becoming someone completely different externally. Real transformation is remembering who you are beneath years of unconscious conditioning internally. And Elias understood that now more deeply than ever, because for years he searched outside himself for peace while ignoring the internal chaos shaping how he experienced life every single day. But once he became aware of that chaos, without judgment, something profound happened. The chaos slowly began losing control over him, because what people observe consciously without attachment begins dissolving naturally over time. And maybe that is why observing the breath feels so powerful spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, because the breath anchors awareness to the present moment, and awareness weakens unconscious programming simply by seeing it clearly. One morning before sunrise, Elias sat outside wrapped in silence while cold air moved softly around him. And while focusing slowly on his breathing, he suddenly experienced a moment of complete stillness internally. No mental noise, no fear, no emotional resistance, just awareness. And within that stillness, he felt something difficult to explain, almost like consciousness itself existed beyond thought completely. And for the first time in years, he felt deeply connected to himself, to life, to the present moment, and tears quietly filled his eyes because he realized how long he had been disconnected from that feeling. Think about that, because many people have forgotten what inner peace even feels like after years of overstimulation and unconscious survival. But peace is still there, beneath the noise, waiting to be rediscovered through awareness. And from that day forward, Elias no longer viewed breathing as something automatic and meaningless. He viewed it as a doorway back into conscious living, because every conscious breath interrupted unconscious mental movement. Every moment of awareness weakened emotional conditioning. Every act of observation strengthened presence instead of reactivity, and slowly reality itself began feeling different around him. Time felt slower, conversations felt more intentional, emotions became easier to understand instead of fear automatically controlling them. And perhaps someone listening tonight is beginning to realize something too. Maybe your life has not only been shaped by external circumstances, maybe it has also been shaped by unconscious internal patterns repeating quietly for years beneath your awareness. And maybe transformation begins the moment you stop running from yourself long enough to observe what has truly been happening within you. Because awareness changes everything. Awareness changes perception. Perception changes emotion. Emotion changes energy. And energy changes reality. And the deeper Elias understood that truth, the less controlled he became by external chaos around him. Because once someone reconnects with themselves consciously, distractions lose some of their power. Fear loses some of its control. Emotional reactions lose some of their intensity. And peace becomes something internal instead of something constantly searched for outside. And maybe that is the hidden reality most people never fully discover. The mind can become either a prison or a doorway, depending on whether awareness is present within it. And perhaps tonight, this message is reaching someone exactly when they needed it most. Someone exhausted mentally, emotionally overwhelmed, disconnected from themselves, constantly trapped inside overthinking and fear. And maybe your healing does not begin through escaping yourself. Maybe it begins through finally observing yourself honestly, breathing consciously, slowing down long enough to reconnect with the awareness quietly waiting beneath all the noise. Because once consciousness awakens deeply enough, reality never feels exactly the same again. And if this message connected with you tonight, If somewhere deep inside these words made you pause, reflect, or see yourself differently, then thank you for being part of the Quantaverse journey. Thank you for exploring consciousness, awareness, and transformation with me, because this channel exists for people searching for something deeper beyond distraction and noise. So if you enjoy videos like this, make sure you like the video, comment your thoughts below, subscribe to Quantaverse, and come back for more, because there is so much more ahead. More awareness, more reality shifts, more consciousness exploration, and more reminders that sometimes the greatest transformation begins quietly within yourself.